What's up, fellas? Happy draft week to each and every one of you. This is one of the most exciting weeks of the offseason as we count down the days to when the NFL's draft starts this coming Thursday. We all know who the number one pick will be. We don't really know who the number two pick is going to be, and that's where the draft really starts. So, in honor of draft week, we're going to do our final mock draft of our YouTube mock draft series. I will link all of our previous mock drafts in the description below. But for now, let's focus on 4.0 and what we think will happen going into this Thursday, right? Chicago starts with Caleb Williams. Again, everyone has known this for the last couple of weeks. We now move to Washington here at 2, and this pick, I keep going back and forth between Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and it feels like quite literally everyone else does. But I keep going back to Drake May personally, and I've mocked Drake May to Washington in 3 of my 4 mocks, including this one, and it really comes down to 2 things for me. The first thing is the arm talent. I think Jaden Daniels has good arm talent. I think that Drake May has better arm talent than Jaden Daniels, right? So you can work with that as an offensive coordinator. And the second thing is just working the middle of the field. And if you look at the better offenses in the NFL, they utilize the middle of the field in their passing game, in their passing attack. Drake May was called upon more often and had more success over the middle of the field than Jaden Daniels did. So those are 2 very big reasons why I keep going back to Drake May at 2. But like I said, literally nobody knows. On the 16th, this last Tuesday, odds were heavily favored towards Jaden Daniels. And then all of a sudden on Thursday, odds across all sports books were equal for Drake May and Jaden Daniels at 2. So again, no one knows what's going to happen. We're going to learn more as this week goes on. But for me, it is Drake May here at 2, Patriots here at 3. And I think people have gotten exhausted about the potential and the possibility for New England to trade back. And the more that I think about it, this offense needs a get up, needs a spark in the worst way possible. And there is 2 very good options here, right? You have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's arguably one of the best, if not the best player in this draft class. But then you've got a quarterback by the name of Jaden Daniels, who just won a Heisman Trophy at LSU. And I'm starting to convince myself that the Patriots are really just going to stick and pick at 3 and just take whatever quarterback falls to them. Because again, you need a player under center that can at least control the offense and give your fans something to watch, because again, their offense last year was a brutal watch. So we're going to go Jaden Daniels to the Patriots here at 3, which leaves Arizona at 4. And this has also been talked about as a trade back spot, but I think that is one of the worst things that Arizona can do. You have 7 picks in the top 104 picks. Use those picks to go get good players. This number 4 pick, I know you probably get the most yield, you get the most return in a trade package, but with this high of capital and with the players that are available right here, don't trade back. You can trade back your 27, trade back your 35. Maybe you want to trade back into the first round with those 2 picks, right? Who knows? But don't trade back from this number 4 spot, especially when you have a need a wide receiver and you have 2 elite prospects in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors at your disposal. Take the good players. You need to start using your capital to bring in good players. So we're going to bring in Marvin Harrison, and I think that's a pretty chalk pick really across the entire draft process. Arizona, wide receiver. Oh, sweet. Marvin Harrison is there for him. Perfect. There's really no more explanation other than, again, elite prospect with a need. It makes too much sense. Chargers here at 5, and this is where the first trade of the night is going to happen. And probably one of the most commonly projected trades in this pre-draft process. We're going to have Minnesota coming up to number 5. Minnesota is going to send number 11, number 23, and they're going to send their 2025 third, right, to jump up 6 spots, which includes then the quarterback tax. They're going to get back pick 5 and pick 140 as well. We're going to offer that trade up, and sure enough, it's accepted. And with this pick, this will be the J.J. McCarthy pick. This is a really logical fit. This has been talked about for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. J.J. McCarthy, Minnesota, really gives Kevin O'Connell the moldable quarterback that he's been wanting. And it's a quarterback that has really good mechanics, is not afraid to stand in the pocket and deliver, and has the mobility and athleticism to make something happen if need be, which is something that I think O'Connell has lacked and has missed dearly in his offense. So Vikings go up to number 5 and get JJ McCarthy. That leaves the Giants here at 6, who are very much in play for a quarterback as well. But Joe Shane himself, general manager of the Giants, said earlier last week, when he was asked about does he feel the need or does he want to potentially go up and get a quarterback or take a quarterback in his in the first round, he said he didn't think so. He trusts Daniel Jones, or I shouldn't say trust, but I mean, between Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Tommy DeVito, he felt comfortable with those three. So he didn't see the need, didn't feel like he needed or wanted to say outright, I guess, that he wanted to go up and get a quarterback. But with the top 4 quarterbacks off the board here, they just got to go best player available. In my opinion, it's going to be Malik Neighbors. They need a receiver like a Malik Neighbors, who is just the ultimate playmaker and who can separate and get open pretty easily. For Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or whoever surrounding the ball, but getting a piece like Malik Neighbors really will take their offense to another level after losing a top playmaker like Saquon Barkley this past offseason. Titans here at 7, and outside of like Chicago and Caleb or Marvin Harrison in Arizona, Joe Alt in Tennessee is almost a lock at this point. If Joe Alt is available at 7 for Tennessee, they are most definitely going to take Joe Alt. But let's say that Joe Alt isn't available. Let's say the Chargers stay at 5 and they take Joe Alt, or the Giants surprise us all and take Joe Alt. Don't be surprised if Tennessee then looks to move back, and really the teams that would be looking to move up, really, and it would only really be for Rome Odunze. But be on the lookout for a team like Chicago, right, to get ahead of everybody else just to make sure that they get their guy. You could make an argument for the Jets. You can make an argument for the Buffalo Bills coming up all the way from 28 for a hefty price tag, but would be well worth it when you've got a quarterback like Josh Allen to pair him up with. And kind of the dark horse that I don't think many teams have been, or many people have discussed about potentially trading up for a wide receiver, is the Indianapolis Colts. So we'll let that one sit. Be aware of those 4 teams if Joe Alt is off the board for Tennessee. But again, when Joe Alt is on the board, that is going to be the pick for Tennessee. So Joe Alt to the Titans at 7, which leaves the Falcons at 8. And with Rome Odunze on the board, we're going to have one of those teams come up to get him, and it is going to be the New York Jets. And it's not necessarily like the Jets, like Joe Douglas, to make this kind of move up on the board. They did a couple of years ago, I believe, to get Jermaine Johnson. But the priority at this point in their offseason is to go get Aaron Rodgers some weapons. And pairing up Rome Odunze with Garrett Wilson, it would just take their offense to a whole nother level. And Daniel Jeremiah even himself said on his media conference call last week that if Rome Odunze starts to get to that 7-8 range, he would not be surprised at all, and that there would be a very strong argument for the Jets to go up and go get Rome Odunze. And I think it's really a match made in heaven. Really, I mean, the way that Rome Odunze would fit into that Jets offense certainly would make them a legitimate threat in the AFC. So Rome Odunze to the Jets there at 8, which leaves the Bears at 9, kind of scrambling because they were kind of hoping that Rome Odunze would be there for them. But he's not. So where do they go now? I don't think there's really an offensive position that they could go for. You can make an argument for a tackle like Olu Fashanu to play on the left side. They seem to like Braxton Jones out there, though, so I don't think they would necessarily force the Olu Fashanu pick. So I think they look defense, and I think the 2 biggest positions of need on the defense are another edge rusher to pair up with Montez Sweat, or on the defensive line. And back to Daniel Jeremiah's media conference call, he said that if there's one name that he would not be surprised that snuck into the top 10 just because of the added premium on the position, it would be Byron Murphy. So we're going to go Byron Murphy to the Bears at 9, and it may feel early, but Byron Murphy, again, is climbing up draft boards. Matt Eberflus's defenses all, I shouldn't say hinge, but a big component of a Matt Eberflus defense is a dominant 3 tech. Byron Murphy can do exactly that. So Byron Murphy makes the surprise. The Bears make the surprise, I should say, and draft Byron Murphy at 9. Falcons then at 10 after trading back with the Jets. It's a win-win really for both teams, right? With the Jets getting Odunze, the Falcons still get their guy who they probably would have taken at 8, but they pick up an additional 4th and get their guy in Dallas Turner. The trendy stat recently that's been going around is that Michael Hoyt, who was a 300-pound edge rusher for the Rams last year, played in coverage. I have it in my notes here on 256 of his snaps. That's a lot. That is a lot for a 300-pound lineman. So Raheem Morris is now in town. Which defensive lineman could drop into coverage when asked to? It's Dallas Turner. He did that the most of all of the other edge rushers in this draft class. He dropped into coverage on 238 of his snaps last year. The scheme, the match, the fit, it all makes sense with the need as well. So Dallas turns to the Falcons at 10. Chargers then at 11 after trading back with the Vikings. There are a lot of different ways that they could go about this. You can make an argument for one of the corners, right? Quinyon Mitchell. You can make an argument for Johnny Newton, who is certainly got the talent. Or even Terrion Arnold there at the bottom. I think the pick, though, is going to be Talize Fuwanga. And a lot of people will go like, oh, he played right tackle. We don't need a right tackle because we have Trey Pipkins. Thing is, you don't need to play Fuwanga at tackle right now. You can put him at guard right now. And now your starting offensive line would go Rashawn Slater, would go Zion Johnson, Corey Linsley, and then Talize Fuwanga and Trey Pipkins. Eventually, when the team is ready to move off of Trey Pipkins, you can move Fuwanga out to right tackle or keep him at guard, one or the other. But again, this is a Jim Harbaugh pick. Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball, wants to win in the trenches, and play good defense. That is how Harbaugh teams play football. Fuwanga is literally the exact kind of player that Harbaugh is looking for in building up his offensive line. So Talize Fuwanga to the Chargers at 11, which leaves Denver here at 12. And this one I've had to really go back and forth on because I'm like, wow, you don't have a second round pick. Do you just stick and pick the quarterback here? Because this is the only chance you're going to get at getting a quarterback, right? At least with some traits that are worthy of a first round pick, I'll say. It just feels a little too rich at 12, which will sound funny because the next pick will be a quarterback. Spoiler, but I don't see the need. I don't see a way where Denver trades up as much as Sean Payton would love to trade up and as much as he has in the past. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them because the amount of capital that it'll take to go up would really jeopardize the future of their team because they are eating so much dead cap of Russell Wilson's contract over the next 2 seasons. So lack of spending money, you need to just accumulate draft picks because that's the only way you're going to add talent to this team. And it got really dicey when trying to find a trade partner for Denver. I had thought like, oh, Philly could go up for a corner. Well, Philly already, it still has James Bradbury for 2 more years, at least 1 more year. Darius Slay, yes, getting older. I ruled them out. They've got pieces already there. This could maybe be a team coming up for Brian Thomas, right? And if Brian Thomas goes way earlier than most people expect, which I don't think so, but the team that I ultimately landed on was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this is kind of against the grain of Trent Baalke a little bit to trade up like this. But when you look at who is available on the board and the needs of the Jacksonville Jaguars, it really makes a lot of sense for Jacksonville to go up and make this kind of move because you're going to end up taking the cornerback 1 of this class in Quinyon Mitchell. You need another corner opposite of Tyson Campbell, who has played well, but you need to add a little bit more. You cannot go into next year starting Ronald Darby as your second cornerback. So that takes care of that. You look at the AFC South and all the wide receivers coming in, and it's really the 2 big names, right? Calvin Ridley and Stephon Diggs. But you look at the offense of Indy, Now Houston adding Stephon Diggs on top of Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and now Tennessee, who just added Calvin Ridley, and already still have DeAndre Hopkins. You need some reinforcements in the secondary to go up against those offenses. And then you look at last year and how productive they were against the pass, and they allowed the 7th most passing yards per game as a defense. So it's like the need is there, the want is there. Getting the cornerback one like Quinyon Mitchell is an easy pick then for Jacksonville. Certainly worth the investment in the trade up. That's really the dream scenario for Denver in this situation. Maybe they get stuck and they have to stick and pick at pick 12 come Thursday. So we'll see what happens. But in this scenario, Jacksonville sees the opportunity to trade up and then go get Quinyon Mitchell. Vegas here at 13. I said, spoiler, this is a quarterback, and I made the point that it's probably a little too early for a quarterback. I don't mind Penix at 13. It's really Bo Nix at 12 or 13 that I have like that's a little bit early kind of argument for. But Michael Penix at least gives Vegas something that they don't have in their quarterback room right now, and that's just a lively arm, right? Like Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, pretty okay or decent point guard quarterbacks, but they don't have like major arm strength, major arm velocity. Michael Penix gives the Vegas Raiders exactly that, and they have come out, and when I say they, I mean Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce. They've come out and said, here's what we want in a quarterback if we so do go quarterback. We want a tough guy who is a leader, who is an experienced winner, and has overcome adversity. That came from the Athletics' Vic Tafur, who covers the Raiders, by the way. All those things really point to Michael Penix. It like every single one of those like checks the box for Michael Penix. So at least getting a guy with some more arm talent really at least can move their offense forward, because I don't think like Gardner Minshew is your guy really for the next 2 years. So Penix there at 13 makes sense. And then you've got draft capital in round 2, 3, or 4, even to add to your wide receiver room. Like you've got Devontae Adams, you got Jacoby Myers, but your wide receiver 3 right now is Trey Tucker. Yeah. You can use one of those picks and go get like a Jalen Polk or a Jalen McMillan, one of his former teammates at Washington, to continue building up the wide receiver room, give him more weapons. And I think Penix to Vegas is a very, very good landing spot for him. Saints here at 14. This has been a very popular edge rusher spot for me. But the way that the board has fallen with Olu Fashanu still there at 14 and the need for a tackle like Fashanu, it's too hard to not take him, because you need a left tackle right now. You potentially may need a tackle to be athletic enough to play on the right side if Ryan Ramchick's knees just do not continue to get better, or just continue to get worse, I should say. With the value there at 14, makes a lot of sense for the Saints. Colts here at 15. I think this is going to be a very popular Brock Bowers spot. And I see a bigger need on this team at corner. So I'm going to go with Terrion Arnold. A lot of insiders that are, kind of covering the NFL draft, from Peter Schrager to Daniel Jeremiah, they have all had Terrion Arnold very high in their mock drafts and have spoken very highly of him in interviews and all the sort. That tells me that I think Terrion Arnold is going higher than what I think a lot of people expect. So maybe 15 is still even too low. But with the Colts, they could use a corner. Like Kenny Moore is a solid slot, but they need a guy on the outside who has got good character, because they've had corners with some off the field issues. If you remember, Isaiah Rodgers and his whole gambling thing, you get my point. They need a guy like Terrion Arnold to continue building up their defense. Cooper DeJean makes a ton of sense for them too. But again, I went with Arnold just because, again, your Daniel Jeremiahs of the world, your Peter Stragers of the world, continue to have Arnold as a top 15, borderline top 12 guy in their mock draft. So Seattle here at 16. This is an offensive line pick. I tried to make an argument for really somebody else on like the defensive side of the ball. It's a little too early for safety. Maybe it's going to be Cooper DeJean. That makes some sense there because you could play Cooper DeJean at safety. Not the range in the middle of the first round to take an off-ball linebacker. In the edge, Boye Mafe kind of flashed a little bit towards the end of last season. You just took Derek Hall in last year's draft in the second round. I don't really see a major push for an edge rusher, but getting a guy like Troy Fautanu, who has position flexibility, who is a smooth mover, just instantly gives them something better on that offensive line to make that offense at least function a little bit better, because that was the big struggle for their offense last year. It was just bad offensive line play. Like, couldn't really run the ball the way that they wanted to, couldn't really protect Geno Smith for very long. Getting a guy like Fautanu just continues to build up that offensive line and really should, improve their offensive production next year. Broncos here at 17 after trading back with Jacksonville. And this is the Bo Nix pick. Personally, 17 is still a little early for me. But this is the only chance that they're going to get at getting a quarterback outside of a Spencer Rattler or a Michael Pratt or a Joe Milton if they go that route even. But it's really as simple as, like, you got to get the quarterback. You have to get the quarterback. And Bo Nix with Sean Payton, I think that's a really nice pairing. It's a nice coach-quarterback duo. And there's really no other explanation outside of that. So Bengals here at 18, and this is a bit of a luxury pick that Brock Bowers fell to them there at 18 with the need at tight end. I know they went outside Mike Gesicki, but Mike Gesicki is not going to hold you back from taking Brock Bowers. With the still the possibility, although unlikely now, it sounds like at this point, that T. Higgins is moved. If T. Higgins is moved, you then have some cover with a guy like Brock Bowers, that you still have a weapon in that offense, and it's not just fully on Jamar Chase because you lost Joe Mixon, T. Higgins then in this scenario, and Tyler Boyd, I should say, who is still a pending still a free agent. So Brock Bowers falls to 18, makes sense for the Bengals where they are at. You could also see them look to go tackle if Brock Bowers isn't there, but in this scenario, again, Brock Bowers is right there. He is a Bengal there at 18. Rams then at 19. I think I've mocked this, I feel like, in every single mock draft that I have done. Laiatu Latu going to the Rams, because the Rams just take good players in the draft. They take the good players, regardless of injury history, regardless of athletic scores, any of that stuff. They just take the good football players. Laiatu Latu right there for them at 19 with the need at edge as well. Steelers here at 20. This will be the second to last trade that I make in this mock draft. And this one also kind of goes against the grain a little bit. I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming up and getting an edge rusher here. And you will see how this can play out for Pittsburgh really well. I think a lot of people will say, like, oh, just take the tackle right now, or take a corner, take Cooper DeJean, take a Nate Wiggins. You will see how this plays out with kind of the abundance of tackles that are on the board between Amarius Mims, JC Latham, Graham Barton. Pittsburgh can afford to move back if they are going to go with offensive line play. So Tampa's going to come up because there is one edge rusher that has been kind of falling down the board a little bit. So Tampa is going to send 26, 89, and a future fourth. And Pittsburgh is going to send 20 and 178. This lines up then with the pick value charts that are out there online. And Tampa is going to take Jared Verse. Really, this creates a three-headed monster of a pass rush with Joe Tryon Shoyinka. I think that's how you say his name. Now Jared Verse and Yaya Diaby, who also flashed a little bit last year. So Tampa continuing to build up their defense with a pass rusher like Jared Verse, who has got a really, power profile. I feel like that's what fits Tampa Bay. They could wait and stick and pick at 26, but I think with a player of the caliber of Jared Verse, I would not be surprised if really any team, but in this scenario, it's Tampa Bay that got aggressive to go up and go get Jared Verse. Miami here at 21. This is Brian Thomas Jr. I've had this, I think, in almost every mock as well. If the opportunity is there and Brian Thomas is available for the Dolphins, they will probably ignore the holes that they have on their defense or on the rest of their offense on the interior offensive line and just go Brian Thomas, because you've got Tyreek Hill's retirement looming, within the next year or two. And that they like to play fast. They like fast players. Brian Thomas, who is 6'3", rating 4.33. That is fast. I think we see how that can all match up for Miami and why they would fall in love with a guy like Brian Thomas. Eagles here at 22. This is going to be Cooper DeJean. And I had mentioned before when talking about Denver, Philly has like their cornerbacks in place to a certain extent, right? Darius Slay is still there. James Bradbury is still there. And then they released Avonte Maddox, but then brought him back on a 1-year deal. So like they've got their cornerbacks. They still have a need for a safety a bit. And I think bringing in a guy like Cooper DeJean would at least give their defense some flexibility to kind of let Cooper DeJean play a bit of a playmaker role in the defense. And I believe that's where DeJean is going to be best utilized, is in all different parts of the field, whether that's in the box on run plays, or he's playing deep safety, or he's dropping down into the slot to play coverage there. It's really the Swiss Army knife of a defensive player like Cooper DeJean that could take Philly's defense, that has a litany of talent already, can take it to another level with a coordinator like Vic Fangio. Chargers here at 23 with the second pick from their return from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is a very interesting spot. They went offensive line at 11. Probably don't need to take another offensive lineman here. AD Mitchell, wide receiver, makes some sense because they don't really have any other kind of wide receiver outside of Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer. But I don't think AD Mitchell is exactly the kind of receiver that they will be wanting or would want to take. So you look at guys then like Nate Wiggins or Kool-Aid McKinstry, corners, because they also have a need at corner, and that could also make some sense. But what I ultimately came back to was Johnny Newton, Big Ten guy. Jim Harbaugh has seen him for the last couple of years at Michigan. And if you know anything about Johnny Newton, this is probably a little too late for his production in his film. I've said this before. I think he might go a little bit later in the draft just because of medical reasons, stuff like that. Chargers getting a guy like Johnny Newton for their defense, again, just is the idea of building up the trenches on repeat, right? Fuaga for the offensive line, Johnny Newton for the defensive line. Building up the trenches is where Jim Harbaugh wants to win, and he's getting two dynamic, very solid, very good pieces in order to win in the trenches this upcoming season. So Cowboys here at 24. This is going to be Jackson Powers Johnson, just a guy that gives them some center guard flexibility, because let's just say they need to bring in a guy that has that kind of position flexibility, but is also big and strong to continue just their good offensive line. So Jackson Powers Johnson, you could also see them go Graham Barton because of his flexibility as well, and his likely projection of a guard as well. But in this scenario, they're going to go Jackson Powers Johnson, keeping it simple, just getting a big offensive lineman that will help out in their run game. Green Bay here at 25. This is the Graham Barton spot. I think this pick for Green Bay will be offensive line. I don't really think they're going to force a defense pick here unless it is like a Cooper DeJean guy that's in the secondary that fits their model is the best way to say it. So Graham Barton plays guard right away for you. He can also play tackle, play center if you need him to. Just knowing how Green Bay likes the idea of positional flexibility, position less offensive line play, right? Like obviously, like their guys have their mainstays or their stronger positions, but they like to have their guys have some flexibility. Graham Barton gives them that exactly. So Pittsburgh then at 26. This is Amarius Mims. Again, the guy that they probably could have gotten at 20, but they traded back with Tampa and they still get their guy at 26. So again, another win-win for two trading teams. Tampa going up and getting Jared Verse, Pittsburgh coming back and getting Amarius Mims. You can play Mims on the right side, right tackle right away. You can move Broderick Jones over to left tackle. Don't need to play Dan Moore there anymore. And that feels like it's a very Steelers pick. Developmental offensive tackle prospect with a super high ceiling and really sets up their offense the way that Arthur Smith would want it to be, right? Power run game and really just, I should just say run game in general. Good offensive line for Najee Harris and Jalen Warren to run behind. So Amarius Mims to the Steelers at 26, I think is going to be a very popular pick. You would probably see that at like 20 even, but it just so worked out that Mims was there after trading back to 26. Last trade of the mock draft here. Arizona is going to trade back with the Kansas City Chiefs because the Kansas City Chiefs see that there is a player on the board that could immediately contribute on their offense. So Kansas City is going to send 32, a future fourth, and 144 as well. So 2 fourths to go up to 27. And there we go. Trade was accepted. Now they will take A.D. Mitchell, and Kansas City would probably do this to get ahead of Buffalo because Buffalo could also use the services of A.D. Mitchell, but Kansas City just has the luxury of being able to move up ahead of Buffalo to take A.D. Mitchell and really give them a bona fide, legit wide receiver. I mean, we don't know the extent of Rashee Rice, what that his season could be like, if he's going to be suspended at all. We don't know. But getting a guy like A.D. Mitchell, the guy that's got size, great body control, who's got an insane catch radius, again, gets open, separates with ease. It's really a match for Kansas City in their offense. Buffalo here at 28. This is going to be Nate Wiggins. It's the Trey White replacement. I think I had Nate Wiggins going to Buffalo in my last mock. And it feels like outside of wide receiver, this is where Buffalo will probably look, which is at corner. Nate Wiggins, his film probably says that he goes earlier than 28. I just worry about his size at 173, 171, whatever it was. That's really small for a corner. I mean, we just saw Emmanuel Forbes last year, who was 165, 166 even. It was somewhere in the 160s. Go in the top 20, and he did not perform like a top 20 pick at all. And I think a big part of that was because of his size, because of his play strength at 160 something. That's my kind of worry with Nate Wiggins, is that he's playing closer to 170, maybe pushing 180. Maybe he had dropped weight for the combine just to run fast. Whatever it is, I think Wiggins could take a slide in the draft just because of size concerns. But he's a very good player. And Buffalo, like I said, after moving on from Trey White, who has struggled to stay healthy, they just need a guy on the outside to dominate. Nate Wiggins is that guy. Detroit here at 29. I went back and forth. I've had a very strong feeling about a guy like Chop Robinson going to Detroit, just a guy that plays fast because they like to play fast. They like speed. But I came back to Kool-Aid McKinstry just because of a need that they still have at cornerback. This is really just a scheme fit. Kool-Aid McKinstry, very good, very solid in press man coverage. That is what Detroit likes to do. So it's really a match made in heaven between defensive scheme and prospect. So Kool-Aid McKinstry to the Lions there at 29, Baltimore at 30. And just like every draft day tradition, somehow a good player falls to Baltimore. And that player this time around is JC Latham. Again, one good player always falls to Baltimore. Always feels like that happens. A good player will just fall to Baltimore in the draft. JC Latham can play immediately on the right side at right tackle if they do not want to play Daniel Falele. You could also play him at guard. Latham is probably going to be best utilized at tackle, but if you need him to play guard right now, he can certainly do that. And just getting a guy like Latham this late with the need that they have at offensive line, huge win for the Ravens. San Francisco at 31. I keep going back to Tyler Guyton here, and I think it's because of just the ceiling that Tyler Guyton has with his physical traits and his athletic ability. Kyle Shanahan couldn't come up with some very, very creative ways to get him in space, to get him moving as a blocker out in space. And that is a Kyle Shanahan offense to a T. I mean, we've seen him move Trent Williams in motion to get him into space. So Tyler Guyton is likely going to sit a year then, because I believe it's Colton McKivitz who is their right tackle. They brought him back, or he's still there for one more year. I think eventually after this year, Tyler Guyton can then slide in, and that offense wouldn't really skip a beat because of Kyle Shanahan. But with the traits and tools that Tyler Guyton has, he could fit really, really well in that San Francisco offense. And after trading back then with the Chiefs, with the last pick in the first round, the Arizona Cardinals, I had thought about a guy like Mike Sanders still. I've never seen a nickel corner, though, go in the first round, so it's probably a little rich there. You could make an argument for a Zach Frazier or Jordan Morgan, to play the interior of their offensive line. I think, though, that they would then look at Chop Robinson and say, wow, we could really, really use a guy like that. Just a guy that has some speed to his game, who is still raw, but you can develop him. And if you develop him right, he has super, super high potential to be a very, very productive edge rusher. And then at least for this year, then your trio of edge rushers, Zaven Collins, BJ Ojulari, who they took last year in the second round, and Chop Robinson this year. I think Arizona would be thrilled with a guy like Chop Robinson for the future of their defense. So that does it for Mock Draft 4.0. I will try to scroll down. Hopefully that doesn't block your view of how the draft went. But Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison. We had our first trade at 5 with the Vikings going up and getting JJ McCarthy. Malik Neighbors at 6. Joe Alt at 7. Roma Dunze at 8. Byron Murphy with a surprise at 9. And the Falcons, after trading back with the Jets, I forgot to mention that for Roma Dunze. Falcons at 10 take Dallas Turner. The Chargers take Taliza Fuanga at 11. Quinyon Mitchell goes to 12 to the Jaguars after trading up with Denver. Michael Penix goes at 13 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Olu Fashanu goes to the Saints at 14. Terrion Arnold to the Colts at 15. At 16, Troy Fautanu to the Seahawks. 17, Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos after trading back. Brock Bowers slips to 18 to the Bengals. Leatu Latu at 19. Tampa trades up to 20 to take Jared Verse. Brian Thomas Jr. to the Dolphins at 21. Cooper DeJean at 22 for the Eagles. Jotty Newton goes to the Chargers at 23. Jackson Powers Johnson to the Cowboys at 24. The Packers take Graham Barton at 25. Amarius Mims to the Steelers at 26 after trading back with Tampa Bay. Kansas City comes up to 27 to take A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver from Texas. Buffalo, after getting sniped on A.D. Mitchell, they take Nate Wiggins from Clemson. Lions take Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama. Ravens at 30 take J.C. Latham to play right tackle, really, or even guard, because they need an offensive lineman desperately. Niners at 31 take Tyler Guyton to play right tackle eventually for them in the future. And at 32, after trading back with the Chiefs, the Cardinals take Chop Robinson. All right, y'all. Like I said, that is Mock Draft 4.0. That does it here. We will be live for the entire first round of the NFL draft right here on this channel, reacting, discussing. Ask your questions. We will have answers for you. Fantasy related, non-fantasy related, just NFL in general. You will get our live reactions to every single pick. Come hang out with us. on draft night on Thursday. So make sure you're subscribed, have that notification bell turned on so you do not miss out on draft night with the fellas. So until Thursday, we will see you then.